On a day that was going to be all about Caitlyn Clark, the Iowa women's basketball team did something special of their own. We talk CC. Number 22 retired, and a big upset today. Locked on Hawkeyes.
You are Locked On Hawkeyes, your daily podcast on the Iowa Hawkeyes. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, welcome in. I'm Trent Condon, and this is the Locked On Hawkeyes podcast. Thanks for being with us and making Locked On Hawkeyes your first listen every day. A very special day at Carver-Hawkeye Arena we're going to get into. Thanks for being with us as we are with you each and every day talking everything going on in the world of Iowa athletics. Super Bowl 59 is here, and there's no better way to make every moment more and every play more exciting than with FanDuel Sportsbook. New customers can bet just $5, and if you win, you'll score $200 in bonus bets. Download the app or head to FanDuel.com to get started. Well, we got a busy one here today as we put the weekend in the books and we kick off your Monday drive in. Of course, a look back at the win against USC, the fourth-ranked team in the country, a team that was undefeated in Big Ten play. And what a performance out of this squad, both the youngsters and the veterans, both stepping up in a big-time way. A lot of great stories to come out of that. Of course, we have to talk about Caitlyn Clark and her retirement ceremony that went down. Just so many different angles to this one. And another one of the just incredible scenes at Carver-Hawkeye Arena. Though the building is old and the building needs renovation, and the building certainly isn't much of an environment for men's basketball, there's something special when that women's team is there, and something special when Caitlyn Clark's in the building, even if she's not on the floor playing the game. And we definitely saw that here this afternoon. Plus, we're going to talk a little wrestling at the end. I'll tell you, Friday night did a rapid reaction podcast after the loss to Penn State. And boy, a lot of discourse going on the page on the YouTube side of things. If you do watch us on YouTube, make sure you hit that like button. Just takes you a moment. Really does help us with the metrics and getting in front of more Hawkeye fans, more people finding us as we talk Hawkeyes each and every day with you. Just takes a moment. Again, hit that like button. Or if you're listening on the podcast side, a 5-star review. I think it tells me need to talk a little bit more wrestling, and the natives are restless at the very least after that performance against Penn State. We'll talk about the bounce back against Maryland, which I know doesn't certainly ignite or extinguish those flames that we saw from Friday. But let's get in before we talk about Caitlyn Clark. And it's very rare that we put Caitlyn Clark in the back burner, right? Because of her importance to this program, to the state, to women's basketball, to basketball in general. There's a lot of ways to go, but I believe we need to start the conversation with the women on the floor for the 40 minutes today and what we saw out of them. This was a matchup that was incredibly difficult for Iowa. And as we talked about this game last week leading into it, the matchup did not go very well. You start with Juju Watkins, who you have to start with, right? And we saw what she did during her freshman campaign, leading USC to a number 1 seed, a run to the Elite Eight, where they were knocked off by UConn in a tremendous game. We know what a tremendous talent she is. And then you talk about the size that they play with and the physicality of that they are. You saw the shooting display, certainly in the second quarter and on, and the way they can shoot it from the outside, and they can beat you in a myriad of ways. This is a great team. This is a great basketball team. And Iowa made them uncomfortable. Jan Jensen, the game plan, the switching defenses, going different ways, and what they did on the defensive end of the floor. It harkens back to the Final Four, the first Final Four for Iowa a couple years back against South Carolina, and that game plan that Fitz came up with about packing the lane, clogging it inside, and basically saying, South Carolina, you got to beat us by shooting the ball. And it worked out, and Iowa pulled off the upset there. And they pull off the upset here. Iowa 12.5-point underdog coming into this game. And they took USC from the opening jump. A tremendous game plan. You start with that component to it. Taylor McCabe early on, her shooting prowess. And Taylor is incredibly talented shooting the ball. She doesn't need a whole lot of room, and we know that. She's not the biggest player. She's not a tremendous ball handler. She's not great on the defensive end of the floor, but she is elite at one thing, and that is shooting the basketball. And I thought there were times, especially during the second quarter and into the third, when things were starting to jump back the other way, that I thought they need to get her back out there because they were struggling to find some offense out there at times. But certainly early on, getting that early jump in the game. Taylor McCabe was a huge, huge part of that. Really like her game and what she can do, and she's added more. She's not just that spot up shooter. She's added more versatility to her game. So after jumping out to that early lead, it's 18-4 after the first quarter. Here comes USC the back the other way, and it all culminates at the halftime buzzer. Juju Watkins with the steal and the run out, and they take the lead in the locker room. And I'll tell you, just as a fan watching that one, you felt down, right? You had this opportunity. You felt even when they were jumping out to the 18-1 lead, 18-4 after the first quarter, you still felt that they left something on the table, right? That lead should have even been bigger. Was it 23-4, 1 point, something like that? And it felt like it should have been more. That they missed opportunities to build on that lead. And then here comes USC roaring back and culminating with that one. And then the third quarter, as USC was just starting to build the lead a little bit more. It wasn't an onslaught, but they were making some plays. Watkins started to get a little bit hot, and you saw that it felt like that boulder was rolling down the hill, and there wasn't going to be any stopping it until there was. 3 minutes left. Iowa gets down their biggest. It's 47-41. And then it was a little bit of everybody. It started with Hannah Stalke. And after she had to exit after those back-to-back fouls on back-to-back possessions with her fourth, we didn't see Hannah back in the game again. But during that stretch, as they were starting to come back and starting to chip back into the game after that 6-point deficit, she was a part of it. And then into the fourth quarter. And this one will be remembered for a lot of people, not just about 22. We'll get to Caitlyn. Not just about what we had, the ceremony, and everything that went along with it. It's going to be about Lucy Olson. It's not fair to call Lucy Olson's season a disappointment. But I think there were people that probably expected more. It's been up and down. It hasn't been as consistent. She's delivered and she's stepped up. Look, the Big Ten in women's basketball is much better than the Big East. And you're seeing that. It was incredibly difficult circumstances, walking in and having to take the reins from Caitlyn Clark. And she's done an admirable job. Also remember, she had a pretty significant injury in that cut that she sustained when they were on their exempt tournament down south. So she's kind of working her way back from that. And to play like she did at the end of the third quarter and into the fourth quarter, it was absolutely amazing. This was the Lucy Olson I think we thought we were going to see all season long. And though we haven't got that, we've still got a pretty good player. And has been really, really good for them. Couple other things. It wasn't just Lucy Olson. How about Addison O'Grady? Had to come in because of Stalke with the foul trouble. And Addison was ready to go. And it wasn't just a couple of great cuts, good catches, and the finishes that she had. How about that jumper from the free throw line? Just an absolute beauty. One of the things that she's really good at is that mid-range jumper. They drew one up for her in one of the losses earlier this season after she'd been hitting them all game long. It just went off the iron. That's going to happen. But she was ready there and hit a big one. As a team in the fourth quarter, this was not USC playing poorly. That was another part that I thought was incredible. This was not just USC collapse. They wilted. They fell apart. The pressure was too much for them. No, USC played pretty well in the fourth quarter. Iowa just played better. Iowa goes 9 of 14 from the floor, 7 of 7 from the free throw line. Only one 3-point attempt in that fourth quarter. They were getting to the rim. They were moving the ball. The assist numbers were immense in that fourth quarter. They were sharing it, showing toughness, showing everything that you wanted out of this group. Speaking of toughness, Cydia Fulter again. Just a tremendous effort. 5 steals in the game. She was so good defensively, getting after the boards, getting Iowa extra possessions, the offensive rebounds, the rebounds in general, the toughness that she displays. And Cydia Fulter is not an elite offensive player, but as a defender, as a tough lady, she has all those things. She is Southside tough. She brings that every single night, and I think we're starting to see her starting to build herself after that surgery into probably the Cydia Fulter we thought we were going to see all season long. One final note. I want to bring up Kylie Feuerbach. And Kylie Feuerbach has not developed offensively probably the way that we hoped. However, on the defensive end of the floor, what she did defensively against Juju Watkins, there were some numbers out there, and I can't remember exactly what they are offhand. I thought I had liked it on Twitter, but I can't find it. Regardless, that When Feuerbach, when they were in man, when she was guarding Juju Watkins, Juju was 0 for 6 from the floor. If that's true, if I have that correct, and whoever had that number, a tip of the ball cap to you for finding that. Regardless, that's hella work. Juju Watkins is a star. She's an absolute stud. This USC team is really good. And Iowa got a signature victory. Iowa got win number 1 against a quad 1 opponent. You start there. But beating a team like this, beating a USC team that's going to be there, a USC team that at minimum is going to be a top 10 team going into the NCAA tournament, this is something that is going to help that resume immensely. And they got it done. Credit to the team. What a performance here. Mention basically everybody on the team because it was a team effort. How about the freshmen? Stremblow, when they were struggling against the pressure, Guyton coming in a couple of times, Mulaney, all of the freshmen that came in and played really well. Iowa gets it done, gets that signature victory, and what a performance it was for 22. On February 2nd, to honor 22, it was a good one. We're going to talk about Caitlyn Clark and what we saw, the ceremony that unfolded. Plus, we got some wrestling talk and maybe a little football at the end. It's a busy one. We got a lot to get into here after Iowa pulls the big upset over USC. Let's talk Caitlyn Clark as we continue Locked On Hawkeyes. Today's episode of Locked On Hawkeyes is brought to you by FanDuel. Super Bowl 59 is here. One game, two teams, endless possibilities. And there's no better way to make every play more exciting than with FanDuel Sportsbook. Whether it's predicting the first touchdown, calling the MVP, or even betting on the coin toss, FanDuel makes it easy to get in on the action. With live betting all game long, you can adjust your bets as the game unfolds and feel the thrill from kickoff to the final whistle. And live betting feature now lets you stay involved no matter what happens on the field. And the app, it's super easy to navigate. Plus, knowing that you can place a $5 bet and potentially win $200 in bonus bets for the Super Bowl, that's the icing on the cake. Download the app or head to FanDuel.com to get started. Bet just $5, and if you win, you'll score $200 in bonus bets. That's FanDuel.com. Bet with FanDuel, official partner of Super Bowl 59. Trent Condon back with you once again, Locked On Hawkeyes. Thanks for being with us and making Locked On Hawkeyes your first listen every day. Hit that subscribe button while you're watching on YouTube, or a 5-star review helps us get in front of more Hawkeye fans. As we continue here, Locked On Hawkeyes, let's move the attention to Caitlyn Clark. And looking back, Caitlyn, her career, for people that have followed me in my career, radio-wise, I called a number of Caitlyn's games in high school. I called all of her tournament games, state tournament games. Didn't have those as a senior, as they got upended by Sioux City East in the regional final her senior year. But called a bunch of her games. I knew her game incredibly well. Saw the highs, saw the lows, and everything in between. And I've known about this young lady for a long time. And the buzz it started. I live in West Des Moines, so also heard about her growing up. And then to see the way that her career unfolds. Also, people that follow the podcast know that I have a close connection to the women's basketball program. I've followed the women's program for a number of years. And because of that, I'll be honest. I never thought Iowa women's basketball would turn into what it is today. And regardless of what Caitlyn Clark became, it just felt like that there was a certain glass ceiling that they were never going to be able to break through. Good team, fun to watch. They score points, but that was it. And when Caitlyn talked about after her commitment of Final Four at Iowa, I was one of the people that scoffed. And she talked about that today. And the people that believed were Caitlyn Clark and Lisa Bluder. And that's what you had. And in a day where Lisa Bluder's hanging out next to David Letterman. We go back to a season ago and Nolan Ryan's hanging out in the stands with his grandchildren. And just the celebrity that we see at Carver-Hawkeye Arena. I was there. I was in the building with the curtains drawn. I was there with good basketball teams, successful basketball teams that would struggle to get the building a third full. And here we are today and seeing the environment, seeing the elation, seeing and hearing the way the crowd reacts, seeing my kids who are 5 and 9, my daughter 9 years old, and the excitement that came out of the final minute of the game, to see my son who's 5, little boy, and explaining that there's never been a better Hawkeye than Caitlyn Clark, and the kid nailed it. There hasn't been. For a basketball player to do what she's done, accomplish what she's accomplished, and yet doing it with flair, doing it with grace, and changing the game, changing the way that we look at a complete sport. People bring up the Tiger Woods comp all the time. Tiger Woods and how he changed golf. And he changed it in terms of access for a number of people. And that's a great thing. But go back and look at the TV ratings for the Masters when Jack made his run in 1986. Take a look at what the Masters numbers were. They increased, but they still got good TV ratings. Women's basketball was an afterthought. Women's basketball was low on the totem pole. And Caitlyn Clark alone, changed the way that women's basketball is now televised, the way that people are engaged in this. I think you're going to see a huge, huge number that's going to come out of this game. A game where Caitlyn Clark doesn't even play. But you got a great game. You got a big upset. You got one that came down to the wire. And then on top of it, you had people waiting to watch Caitlyn Clark have her jersey put into the rafters. And that's all this was. It wasn't a 3-point shootout afterwards, right? She wasn't going to go out there and do something actually as a basketball player. It was her jersey being raised. And for you fans that have been there from the start, for the people that have followed this program over the last 25 years, 35, go all the way back to see Vivian Stringer, and to see what it is today. It is unthinkable. She has accomplished something that nobody could have imagined. With the ponytail flopping and going up and down and bringing all the elements that she did, we have been incredibly lucky to see her. We're going to see her again as the Brazilian national team is going to come in for an exhibition game before the WNBA season, and that'll be great. It'll be incredibly cool, and she talked about that as well. But to think that Fox put this game on, Fox then stayed with it. Fox was there all the way through because they know this is different. They know that she is different. We got to see it. We got to watch it for 4 years. As Hawkeye fans, we got to see greatness unlike anything we've ever seen before. Nobody at any walk has done something at this point in the sports landscape like Caitlyn Clark. And we got to see it. I thought it was incredible as well because that's the kind of person that she is. She's so thoughtful. And she thinks outside of just the surface level. And at times, is it calculated? I think so. But somebody of the stature of Caitlyn Clark, you have to be calculated. You have to think about those things. But for her to bring up the players in the past that wore that number and talk about the other 22s and getting to the point that it was. And I just thought it was something that didn't have to be said, but it was. Mentioned seeing Coach Bluter there on the baseline with David Letterman. Just wild. A couple seats down, there's Kate Martin and Gabby Marshall. And Kate Martin enjoying the Carver cone. It was a tremendous day. And it's the kind of day that makes you wonder about this program. And, another thing, past Caitlyn Clark, I had this thought as I was going through and trying to find how does this momentum continue? Because it was a huge recruiting weekend. They had some of the top prospects in the country. Jenica Lewis from here in Central Iowa was a top 10 player. And I don't have the list in front of me. Huge group of prospects, though. Matt Harpering's daughter, who's the number one player in the country for her class of 2026, big prospect from Kansas City. They had the who's who of college basketball there. Addie Deals, who's already committed and signed, she was there. The who's who of high school basketball was on campus to watch this. And the question became to me, and this is something that I was thinking about before the game, is how do we continue this momentum? Because this has been fun. It's been great. And it's great to have something like this be an identity of the University of Iowa and the athletic department. We know what a trailblazer the athletic department was for years in women's athletics. And now having this component and building on the biggest women's sport as it pertains to college athletics, how do we build on it? How do we continue? How do we make sure that this just doesn't become they were elite with Caitlyn Clark there, but that was it? It's still a nice program, but that was it. We got to get players. That's where you start. But you have to build on that momentum. And my thought was before this one, and the importance of getting this win aside, as I went back and I looked to when UConn basketball was building, right? And they made a couple of tournaments with Gino Ariema in the 90s, early 90s. But then they got a player, a generational player, an elite level player, and Rebecca Lobo. And ultimately, it culminated in her senior year by winning a national championship. But right afterwards, UConn continued to be UConn. They took a small step back. They lost the following year in the Final Four to Tennessee, and it took them a couple more seasons before they won another national championship again. And it's not to say that Iowa basketball is going to get to the heights that UConn women's basketball did. However, to be that consistent winner, to be a place that is looked at, you see the way that the UConn fan base travels. You see the way that they fill the building night in and night out. And that's what you want to see the Iowa women's program become. You got to have success. And you have to follow that success up pretty quickly. Getting back to the tournament this year is immensely important, I believe. That is something that continues the momentum. And this win today obviously helps make that case. But that win, coupled with the young women that were in the building to see that, that's how this thing gets different. This is how it goes from nice program, can win some games, you win 20, get to the tournament, maybe win one or two, to what it's been. And then maybe ultimately taking that final step. There will not be another 22, both literally and figuratively. But you get a bunch of players, high-level players. Now you're talking. That's where the excitement lies about this program and what it can be still. The back-to-back appearances in the national championship game don't have to be the apex. And when you look at the talent that was on campus this weekend, you look at the show that they were given. How about the USC team and Coach Gottlieb having her ladies stay there and watch the ceremony? I think that said a lot about them. But for Iowa, going forward, that's another reason. This thing, what they did, what they accomplished on the court, could be a whole lot more than just being there to watch Caitlyn Clark have her jersey hung up in the rafters. Great day. Absolutely incredible day. Wrapping things up on the other side here, Locked On Hawkeyes. Iowa wrestling with a bounce back, but some heat out there on the brands. Does Iowa need to make a move there? We'll talk about that when we come back. This is Locked On Hawkeyes. Back with you one final time, Locked On Hawkeyes. I'm Trent Condon. Thanks for being with us as Iowa rolls past Maryland in wrestling 34-9. So after Friday night, I go up, put up the podcast, watched and disappointed with the effort. We know Penn State was a behemoth, and they were. And as I talked about in the podcast, I know that a lot of people were frustrated, disappointed, pissed off with the way that they got manhandled by Penn State. I didn't think it should have come as a surprise. Maybe some individual matches and you want a little bit more, but regardless, you just know Penn State's a whole lot better. And as a fan, it's a terrible feeling. And you come back out there and you roll and you get the big victory. You give up a pin at 33, got the backup in there, Ayala, after going out there and being one of the few bright spots on Friday night. He gets a break. Estrada goes down at 57. That's a really good wrestler and loses 4-2 in Ethan Miller, who's ranked 6th. Everybody else wins. Ben Keeter got a nice win over a top 12 kid. It was workmanlike, doing what Iowa wrestling should do. And this is what they do. But for most of the fan base now, it feels like that's not enough. I don't know if there's a realistic path to cut back against Penn State. And people throw out the names. Kyle Dake, Spencer Lee, go young, go different, David Taylor, whatever it is. And then you couple it with the news that Ross, the outstanding wrestler from Fort Dodge, is committed to Oklahoma State. And the frustration builds from that. I don't have the answer. And I don't think the right answer personally is just somebody else. Somebody else for the sake of somebody else, I don't believe is going to lead to cutting down this behemoth that is Penn State. It has to be just not somebody new, somebody innovative, somebody that's going to do it a different way. I got to know how. I got to know the game plan behind it. And I know for a lot of people, that's just loser mentality or happy with mediocrity. Now, finishing the top 4 every year is not mediocrity, but for Iowa wrestling fans, it feels that way. And that's where you are. And I'm not going to talk you off that because I get it. But it's just another one of those today. 34-9, big victory. However, it just feels hollow after what we saw over the weekend. Well, we will be with you throughout the course of this week. We got to get some football talk in here. A lot going on. We had a bunch of commitments last week we didn't get into. We're going to talk about that. Iowa also picked up a huge commitment this weekend from a defensive back for this upcoming class, the class of 2025 kid that is finishing up his senior year. Thought they were going to be done. Not the case. He'll be signing here coming up this week. So we got that component, something that kind of came out of nowhere. We know Iowa needs some help at defensive back at the cornerback position, and they found somebody, maybe young, going to take some developmental, and not a real big kid, but still somebody that Phil Parker likes. And as we say, in Phil, we trust as it comes certainly to those defensive backs. So we'll get into some football talk as well. Start gearing up for that. We got men's basketball. They'll be back after this long 8-day layoff as they'll face off against Purdue coming up on Tuesday. That'll be a 6 o'clock tip-off from Carver-Hawkeye as they get back into the swing of things. A lot of rumblings, a lot of rumors about this basketball team and how it's going to look. People shutting it down, injuries maybe bigger than we thought, transfer portal, coaching changes. It's kind of like the NBA, Sometimes the rumors and the innuendo and all the craziness, like the trade deadline that we had in the NBA of this weekend, sometimes can be more fun to talk about than the actual games on the hardwood. But that aside, we will get into that throughout the course of the week. Thanks for being with us and making Locked On Hawkeyes your first listen every day. Again, as you're with us, hit subscribe. Just takes a moment and helps us get in front of more Hawkeye fans. We'll talk to you again tomorrow. Until then, go Hawks.